Before podcasting, before marketing, even before the TV news stuff, I worked at Chuck E. Cheese. This was from 1993 until 1996, the college years, part of the college years, most of the college years. So, how did I get involved to get us a job at Chuck E. Cheese? For those, I think everybody watching or listening to this week's podcast, and thank you for being here, by the way, knows or remembers Chuck E. Cheese, Showbiz Pizza from their childhood, the nostalgia, if you will. Um, I don't remember going to Showbiz because when I was a kid, we had Showbiz. I remember Chuck E. Cheese was a thing, but Showbiz was primarily what I was most familiar with in the St. Louis area where I grew up. And I remember going on vacation. I think we were in or on our way to Florida, and we stopped and ate at a Chuck E. Cheese. And I think that was the first time I had ever heard of Chuck E. Cheese. So as time went on, and obviously I don't remember the exact history timeline of it, but at some point, Showbiz and Chuck E. Cheese merged, Billy Bob and the Big Bear, which I'll be honest, I preferred Showbiz to Chuck E. Cheese. But by the time I got involved in this whole operation, if you will, it was Showbiz had gone away. There were some remnants still left when we were in college. It was my freshman year. I can remember going to Chuck E. Cheese in Cape Girardeau, and we would go. We didn't have dinner meal plan on Sunday night, so we would go on Sunday evenings, and we went a few times with a group of guys and a group of girls from my floor and our sister floor. And we would go and have fun and play skee ball and but there were some remnants still of Billy Bob. There was a Billy Bob carousel or merry-go-round kind of thing that was in there and stuff. And I remember, and this was before my wife and I were dating. We were friends and just hanging out. But then that next year, that next semester of sophomore year, she actually got a job there. And by that next spring of 1993, I was starting to look for a job. And so she actually hooked me up with an interview, and I ended up getting a job there and started off, just as a cashier. But with most jobs, you especially part-time, you get in and you find out that you're going to be doing more than what you anticipate. And I started there, like I said, as a cashier, but it was really open to being many different things because there were really four different sections, if you will, that had job titles. So you were a cashier, which meant you greeted customers as they came in, you ring up their orders, you maintain the salad bar, which was right off to the side of us. So when there weren't people coming in, you were making sure that the ice was still in there, that the kale around it looked good, that everything was stocked and fresh and ready to go. And then you also were in charge of the ticket counter where kids would come and cash in their tickets to get their prizes. So it was a big section area that you were really kind of in charge of. And usually on the weekends, there'd be two or three. We had two cash registers, I remember. And then there was usually somebody kind of floating between the salad bar and the ticket area because it would get pretty chaotic in there. Or we'd pull people from different areas. So that was one area. That's where I started off, was in cash. Then go into the back, that's the kitchen area. So you're making dough for the next day's pizzas, you're prepping sandwiches, you're prepping everything, getting everything ready. But it's always kind of looking ahead and getting ready. But then also in the heat of the battle, in the heat of the day, you are making orders, you're filling orders. So and again, keep in mind, I'm speaking from 30 years ago. This is how things were. So when somebody would place an order at the cash register, the machine in the back would spit out a ticket, and then you'd pull that off, make the order, put it through, someone cuts it. Hopefully there's more than one person in there. Sometimes there wasn't. So you'd have to keep an eye on while you're prepping and making the next order, sometimes catching pizzas before they fall out. And sometimes it didn't work because it was a tri or a bi-level pizza oven. So you had a top oven and a bottom oven, and you had to be on your toes. There were times that it got crazy busy. And I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But so that was area two. Area three was the showroom. And eventually, like I said, I did all of these jobs plus more, and I'll get to that too. So the showroom, you're basically watching the window, cook, cuts the pizzas, puts it on a tray, puts the order in the window, and usually would say runner, and then that's the cue for someone to come out, grab the pizza. And in the showroom, in our Chuck E. Cheese, and this, I know people think Chuck E. Cheese and whatever, whatever. Um, we were owned by a company that owned the Ponderosa in town, and they also owned the Chuck E. Cheese in Paducah, Kentucky. And our manager, at the time, our head manager was very meticulous, really by the book kind of guy. Jim Cato followed, ran a tight ship, and it showed, and it reflected in the quality and the service, and I learned a lot working there. Um, and that sounds cheesy, I know, but seriously, it was more than just a job. It became, I really enjoyed the people that I worked with. But anyway, you're in the showroom, you're delivering pizzas. Sometimes you're hosting the birthday party, so you're the birthday party host. So when a kid's party comes in, you have the table set up and ready to go. You get the drink orders. You basically are taking care of these families and the kids and all the guests that come along with it. Make sure they get their tokens. They're playing games. You're cutting the cake, singing happy birthday, and we'll get to all that in a minute as well. And then the fourth area was showroom tech. And that showroom, our game room tech is where all the video games are. And so as a tech, and I'm not technically sound at all, but again, we ran into a circumstance, they needed a tech. I ended up filling in, and then I ended up doing that on a more regular basis. But basically, from my perspective as a low-level employee, I was just unjamming tickets or making sure that the machines were running, cleaning up stuff. Sometimes the equipment would get dirty and that would cause it to jam or stick or whatever. But we had a tech manager who really was the one that was fixing the machines. The animatronics sometimes would malfunction. You were just kind of basically making sure things were up and running. Um, so those are the four primary areas. Then, of course, management team. But when you're in the showroom, and the philosophy was back then, and again, I don't know how it is today, but everybody saw Chucky. Every guest that came through saw Chucky at some point. So if you were in there at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon and it was crickets, I mean, someone would go get in that costume, at least at our store, and come out and dance a little. And when I say see Chucky, yeah, you're going to see him on the stage. There were the animatronic Chucky, but then we had the costume Chucky as well. And that's what I mean when I say everyone sees Chucky. That costume character comes out, does a little meet and greet, maybe does a little dance, and then can go back in and change. And we had, uh, especially on the weekends, we had people who were scheduled to be Chucky. And that was, I mean, you're not in it the entire time because it does get hot and sweaty. And yes, I did do Chucky, the character Chucky. I was uh, Jasper T. Giles, the hound dog, and then Helen Henny, the hen. We had all three of those costumes from time to time that we would do that. So it was a whole part of the gig, and the dancing and the choreography. So they would send, and this was back in the day, the tapes were big, 3/4 inch tapes. And we had a big machine in the back. You pop that tape in, and it controlled all the animatronics. It controlled the TV monitors, and it was on a loop. And so um, I don't know if it was every quarter, if it was twice a year. I don't remember how they broke it down, but there was like a holiday version as well. I can remember at Christmas time, but we would have to learn a new dance, the choreography to go along with it. And then sometimes, like, there was a standard birthday one, but I remember during the course that I was there, they scrapped that first one and we had to come up with a new birthday dance. But there were also, we called it the live show. So periodic, especially during birthdays, there would be a point where everybody would get up, everybody would dance, and we would switch these tapes out. So if there was a birthday, we would have that tape playing and ready to go. And then you knew, okay, now it's time for everyone to get up and dance and sing and do this birthday celebration. I say happy, you say birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday. That was part of this whole gig. The phone would ring as the cashier, you're answering it. We're making magic at Chuck E. Cheese. This is Kevin. How can I help you? I mean, it was a well-oiled machine from that perspective, and it kept things up and running and going. But of course, there's a dirty side, an underbelly, if you will. Not, I say dirty, and I don't mean nefarious dirty. I mean, like literally. I mean, the grease traps, for example. Have you ever cleaned a grease trap before? If you've worked in a restaurant, I'm sure you've at least seen the grease trap, but we had one. And there were times that I was the unlucky recipient of that duty. And so that was probably my least favorite thing at Chuck E. Cheese was the grease traps. Um, we'd have to, and I don't remember how often we did it. I did it a few times while I was there, but we would have to come in after hours and take the ovens apart and clean them. And that was a very intensive process. The ball pit, the ball crawl, ours was not a giant one, but it had a slide in it. Those things get nasty. And we would collect all the balls in those big nets, take those nets then to the car wash, spray them all down, and then someone would stay behind and clean. It was like a vinyl, I guess, on the inside. Clean that down, scrub it. We'd find socks and band-aids and diapers and toys, coins, money. I don't remember ever finding anything on my personal experience doing that. I don't ever remember finding anything um, overly exciting in that regard. Um, but probably the dirtiest job I ever had there was a kid who, um, let's just say, had an accident. And when I went into the bathroom, it looked like he just decided to paint with his poop. He, I mean, it was on the toilet, it was on the floor, it was on the wall, and I'm thinking dad was with him, but maybe not. And then there was just a pair of poopy underwear sitting on top of the trash can. That was probably, I talked about the grease trap. That was probably the grossest thing I ever encountered in my time at Chuck E. Cheese, having to clean that up. Because again, we were known for our cleanliness and our friendliness and all of that. So that was probably one time that it was pretty insane, pretty out of control. But, I have been asked, believe it or not, I've been asked to do this topic by a couple of people. So that's why I decided to throw this one in to the mix. And it's been 30 years actually this month that I left Chuck E. Cheese. But while I was there, uh, in addition to working on the video games or, making pizzas, the prep work going into that, you don't just roll in and start making pizza. So usually the opening kitchen person would get there around, I think most days it was 8, but like on Thursdays, because the truck came on Thursdays, the food truck that is, we would get there early. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you would get there earlier because we were open longer and you had more people, more volume coming in, but you were always making the dough for the next day. And so uh, it was a giant metal bowl and a giant hook, and you would pour a bag of the flour. Maybe it was two, I don't remember. You'd pour a big bag of, I say flour, it's the pizza dough mix with the water, and you measure it out and do it all accordingly. It would spin for a certain amount of time, and then you would take that out, and then you would start cutting slices, cutting chunks of that dough off, weighing it, and then depending on the weight, each pizza size, small, medium, large, personal, all had different cheese sticks, had a different one, and you'd ball it up, put them onto this big tray, oil them down, put them on a rack. Once that rack was full, cover it up with a clear plastic trash bag and roll it into the refrigerator. And then that's the proofing process. Now, if it was a day that the manager the day before didn't predict right on what we were going to have order wise, there would be times where you were. So then, okay, so then I'm getting ahead of myself. The next day, then when you're making the pizzas, when you pull out a tray, you get one of those balls, flatten it, run it through. There's a 2 roller process thing that it would go through. The first, if it was cheese sticks, it would just go, or breadsticks, it would go through once. But if it's dough, you're putting it through again, putting it into the pan, adding the sauce and all the other toppings and stuff. And again, everything's measured out, or not measured out, but it's there's a sign with all the weights as you're going down the line on the prep table. Boom, puts it in the oven and makes it. Same with the sandwiches and stuff. You'd pull those out. Those were usually pre-made. And then you would put them into the halfway through the oven so they heat up. Cheese melts and it's good. Italian subs at Chuck E. Cheese, fire. Cheese sticks at Chuck E. Cheese, fire. We actually uh, duplicated that or tried to duplicate it as best we could tonight. My wife did actually for dinner, made some cheese sticks and pizza from sourdough. Um, it was, that was when I talked earlier, about the day before. So if we got slammed and we ran out of dough, we would have to then make the dough and use it pretty quick. And it just doesn't have time to proof, so it doesn't get as puffy and thick and whatever. But I mean, sometimes you were just in that kind of situation where you didn't have a choice, and that's what you had to do. And so we would do that. We would get that going. And um, again, it didn't happen very often, but sometimes it did happen. Birthday cakes, they have these sheet cakes that we would use. We'd take a little round cake for the kid to sing and blow the candles out on. But then we had a giant sheet cake in the back. So you would cut that little round cake into appropriate number of pieces, and then anything extra would come off of this big sheet cake. That chocolate cake with the whipped cream icing was so good as well. That was another thing I miss about working at Chuck E. Cheese. But the box was very interesting because you would fold the sides of the box, and then it would have little lines on the flat part of the box then. And so then you would just take your knife and line it up and boom, 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 and you're able to slice it and get those cake pieces out and ready to go. So that's another little secret of the industry, if you will. But again, make sure everyone's happy. If there are complaints, and one time I was taking a pizza out and the pizza slid right off the pan and onto the leg of a kid. We ended up, nobody got hurt, nobody got burned. The parents weren't, nobody was pissed or anything like that. But again, that customer service. So gave them a roll of tokens, gave them some extra stuff at the gift shop. So just to make the experience enjoyable, because again, I think a lot of times you remember how people make you feel, and so it was always trying to make that good experience. And we had repeat customers for years. I've worked there 3 years. There were a lot of the same people coming through, and again, it wasn't just for birthday parties. It would be people coming in on a random Tuesday or whatever the case may be. So you make them feel good. They enjoy their experience. They have a good time. Even in the short time that I was there, some of the technology change, we had the tickets, and then back in the day, you would feed it into a ticket counter and it would count how many tickets they had, and then you would let them know, and then they could pick their prizes. Towards the end, we had a thing that you put them in and it would weigh them. I don't know if it was as accurate. Sometimes people would argue, "Oh no, I know I had more tickets than that," or whatever. Sometimes that counter would skip or whatever. I wasn't a terrible stickler with the tickets. I mean, if somebody had 4 tickets and wanted something out of the 1,000 ticket bin, obviously that's not going to happen. But if they were close, yeah, it's a cheap little prize. Again, trying to make them happy. I actually still have my name tag. Yeah, it says Dexter. That was my nickname in college. I think we discussed that on a previous episode. That Animaniac sticker on the name tag is original from Chuck E. Cheese too. This was one of the prizes. Um, so in 1994, a year into the gig, I was named Employee of the Month in July, and I got this snazzy coffee mug, which 32 years later, still proudly drinking out of. And eventually, my wife, while there, became an assistant manager, and um, sometimes that was not easy working together, but because we were not engaged, we were not boyfriend. I mean, we were boyfriend and girlfriend, but eventually things got fine, and she actually ended up leaving. And when she left, I got moved into what they moved up the shift supervisor into an assistant manager role, and then I became shift supervisor, which was low man on the totem pole for managers. And looky here, I still have my Chuck E. Cheese tie from those days as well. And actually, becoming assistant manager, you had to wear a shirt and tie every day. And Skippy, a guy named Skippy, his real name is Kevin as well. He taught me how to tie a tie. He was an assistant manager, and he's the one that taught me how to tie a tie. Because back in the day, I would tie, or someone would tie a tie for me, and I would just loosen it and take it up over my head for fraternity meetings. But when I learned that I was going to have to wear a tie to work every day, or almost every day, um, I'm like, I got to learn how to do this. So Skippy is the one I credit with teaching me how to tie a tie. But yeah, being the assistant manager, being a shift supervisor slash assistant manager, low man on the totem pole meant that whenever the alarm would go off, we had an alarm that we'd have to set, and then you had like 30 seconds to get in and deactivate it. And I can remember a few times if that alarm would get tripped, and sometimes the wind would knock a door open, or if it wasn't shut all the way. Or sometimes, there were times where there was someone in the restaurant uh, when they were not supposed to be, and that alarm would trigger. But one time, because I was low man on the totem pole, I got called, and it was probably, I don't know, we had been closed a couple of hours at that point, and I went in, um, walked in, was greeted by, or got to the parking lot. The Cape Girardeau Police Department was there, let him in. We walk around, and I was standing toward the back with one of the other officers of the showroom where you first walk in, and they were up by the stage because they'd heard a noise up in the stage area. And I really, because it made another noise, and the officer like went for and flipped that curtain open only to find that it was the air letting out of the animatronics. Those things had valves, and you would turn those valves at night at the end of the shift, and then it would take a while for all the air to decompress out of those things. Um, and so that noise, we think what triggered the alarm is somebody hadn't closed the back door all the way, and the wind caught it, and so that set the alarm off, and that's what uh, kind of got them out there and looking around and making sure everything was okay. Everything was okay. It was just a funny little story. I learned early on because I wanted to go. I didn't know if I wanted to what I wanted to do career wise. I knew I didn't want to uh, necessarily work at Chuck E. Cheese as a shift supervisor or as a manager or as an employee in that regard. But I was interested early on in like marketing or advertising and getting the word out about Chuck E. Cheese. And I can remember we had a day where it was public safety day, and the Cape Girardeau Fire Department came and the police were there. And I actually got to dress up like a crash test dummy. You remember the crash test dummy from the 80s and 90s? Well, but they had those costumed characters there, and I got to be one of those. Um, and I can remember kind of doing the push and writing a press release for that, and that was really, I think, the first uh, taste of having an interest in the marketing side of things and the promotions side of things, and trying to kind of get the word out. Um, we, like I said, had it was a college town, so there were a lot of college students working there. Um, being a college student myself, and probably the worst day working there that I can remember was it was the Sunday after my wife's sorority initiation dance. We had gone out the night before, drank a lot of Purple Passion. I was so hungover. I had to be there at 7 o'clock I had to be at work at 7 o'clock on that Sunday. I did not want to be there, and I was sick. Not good. And they're kind of prepping, and I didn't do anything that was detrimental to the food or anything by any means, but just that nauseous feeling all day, and could not wait for 3 o'clock to roll around so I could get the hell out of there. Um, but I remember falling asleep at the prep table. I put my head down when I was supposed to be getting stuff ready for the salad bar. I kind of moved around and put my head down and took a nap. Yeah, it was not good. Uh, but again, 19, 20, 21, however old I was, I think I was about 20 at that point. But anyway, that was a memory that I was actually sharing the other day with some folks. So, um, but yeah, it was fun memories, good times. Um, and it all, as I say, all good things must come to an end. This was a part-time job. This was not going to be, like I said, my future career. But I was having fun. I had graduated in December of 95 and was still kind of trying to figure out what was going to be next for me. And really kind of what the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of staying at Chuck E. Cheese was um, one of my coworkers. And again, I'm a shift supervisor. I'm a management level, if you will, using air quotes for those who aren't watching. And I just happened to see the salary list, and there were there was a person working there who I really liked, but was not in management and had worked there less time than I had, who was making more than me. And that was kind of my wake up moment, epiphany, and figuring out, okay, it's time to be grown up and find a grown up job and really start looking for a career and not just a job. And so that was my wake up call. And that was another one of those, learning moments, life lessons, if you will, to not get to not, you know, work in that kind of environment or that kind of situation where you're not necessarily your work and stuff is not being, I guess I felt a little underappreciated, and that was part of the reason why I ended up leaving. And I'm glad I left when I did because it wasn't much longer after that that the company that owned the Chuck E. Cheese in Cape and the one in Paducah decided they were going to close the Cape location, and they moved a couple of the managers, the good manager Jim that I was talking about, got moved to the Paducah location to run that restaurant. So I was happy for him in that regard. But um, it wasn't much longer. I probably less than 6 months after that I had left that they closed it, and then it is now, and I think it has been since then, a Goodwill. It's the Goodwill store in Cape, if you're familiar with Cape Girardeau at all. It was over by the old Toys R Us, and I just have so many good memories of you know working there and the people. Again, the coworkers that made it fun, and we laughed and just had a good time. And so it was a lot of good memories, a lot of good times. I think I've hit all my talking points. I'm just kind of scanning my list here to see. I don't remember many like crazy uh, parent stories. I remember one time a woman got mad because I made her teenage kids get out of the ball pit. The ball pit was for kids that are little. Again, if you've been, it's like that at all those kinds of places. And she's like, well, they're kids at heart and all that. And I'm like, yeah, but they're too big for this. And there are little kids in here. Now, had there not been other kids in there, it might not have been an issue, but they were kind of being, asses. And so I'm like, you got to get out. And so that was probably off the top of my head one of the only negative customer interactions that I had. I don't really remember any others, but um, you know, those part-time jobs that you get as a youth, they teach you about time management, they teach you about showing up, perseverance, being there, getting, the job done, getting a work or having a work ethic, and really building teamwork and showing pride and patience. Probably learned a lot of patience in that job with some of the messes that I talked about earlier that had to be cleaned up. And looking back, and I know that the mascot itself has changed over the last, I don't know, 10 years or so. It's not the same look or feel or vibe. And when my kids or our kids were little, we would go to the one in Paducah. We would go when we lived in Indiana, and in St. Louis, my parents would take them. And it was always kind of fun looking back and seeing that, but it has evolved, it has changed. I think they were trying to do some Chucky arcades or something. I don't know that those really worked out the way that they were supposed to. But um, it's just different now, and I think as an adult, that's why part of it is different. It's not the same that it was when I was obviously when I was a little kid, but then even working there, kind of seeing how the sausage is made, if you will. Um, but yeah, we would have great times, great memories. Get those occasionally a mess up pizza from time to time. Sometimes the manager would be pissed and throw it away, but sometimes if it wasn't an intentional mistake, because sometimes the kitchen folks would purposely make the wrong pizza in the hopes that we would get to keep it and eat it. Didn't always work out that way, but when it did, it was another perk of the job. And before I close, do you know what Chuck E. Cheese's middle name is? What does the E stand for in Chuck E. Cheese? It's entertainment. Charles Entertainment Cheese. And that was part of the whole training process, if you will. So back in the day. What do you think? What if you were a Gen Xer and remember going to Chuck E. Cheese as a kid, or even with your kids now, or in the last decade or so? What are your thoughts? What are your memories? What are your impressions? People complain about the pizza. I always liked the pizza, but the cheese sticks, the Italian sub, and the chocolate cake were all probably my three favorite things to eat at Chuck E. Cheese. But I loved it. It was a good time. It was a great memory, and yeah, that's going to wrap up this week's episode. Let me know what else you want to see and hear on the non-wrestling weeks of the My 123 Cents podcast. I appreciate everyone being here. Thanks for listening and or watching, and I will see you next time.